Hi, my name is Heiko, and there are not many tutorials about building cards around here, but they are everywhere in today's web design. So that's what we're gonna practice together. We're gonna build it directly from a Figma design with Elementor Pro. And even if you're more a beginner, after this tutorial, building cards will be a piece of cake for you. One more thing in advance, as a founder of a small agency, I know that many developers have a problem to really build according to a design for reasons like I don't think it's important or I don't know how to implement it. But knowing that good looking websites don't just win over clients, but more importantly customers, I know that it's crucial to really bring a design to life. And in this tutorial, I show you my way to do it and a great tool that really makes it easy. Okay, here's the overview of what we'll do. We'll need some preparation. We'll set up Elementor, we'll set up the colors and the font styles so that we can design easily. Then we'll continue with a special tool to ensure a real pixel perfect design from Figma. Then we'll set up the grid and I'll explain our design systems. And then we'll get going with the card design and really make it look perfect. Now let's have a quick look on how to set up Elementor. For this tutorial, you'll just need the basic version, but if you want to follow me along with making the cards more interactive in a later tutorial, you'll need also the Pro version. Now let's go to the Elementor settings and check these two boxes so we can use the colors and fonts we will set up in Elementor's theme style settings. And then on the Experiments tab, you can choose whatever you want, but please make sure to have the Flexbox container activated because we will use it. And don't forget to save your changes. And also, I recommend to install the Hello theme under Appearance Themes. And now we're ready to set up the colors that are defined in Figma. To proceed, let's create a page, load it in the Elementor editor, and after that, let's go to the Elementor settings and to the global colors. But wait a moment, let me show you where I got these colors from. Right here from the Figma design, and we have many colors, but we don't need all of them. We need just 4 of them, and I have copied them over, but you find the hex codes in the description. While I have already prepared that, you just can follow along and copy all the names in and the hex codes. And as we are done with that, now let's go to the global fonts. And as we are here, we see nothing set up yet, so let's check Figma for the right font styles. And as we are here, we need to turn on inspect mode, and then we can see that we have a roofline, first font style, a second font style, here it's called an H6, we might call it differently, and a third font style, and this is called P small. And here we see all the CSS styles, and also that on 2 of them we have an opacity, and those are even 2 different grays. We might go with one to make it easier. And now the problem would be that we go back and forth between Figma and Elementor, and that takes time, but I found a different way. And the tool I use for that is called Cleansheat. It's a great tool. I leave a link in the description, and we'll use it for this. We'll select one of the font styles, and then we do a screenshot with Shift, Command, and 4 on a Mac, and we will mark this area and say done, and then you see it's shown here, and then we will pin it, and we'll use that later, and then we'll do it for the other font styles as well. We do a screenshot, say done, and say pin it. And we can also save it, then it goes away. And we have the roofline, we have the H6, and now we select the third one, the P small. Do screenshots, say done, pin it before, save it, and it's now saved to the hard drive. And now the cool thing is we can move back to Elementor and input the numbers with one strike. And now we're here, we can use these pinned screenshots to easily input the numbers. And we start with the roofline and call it like this. And we see it's Titillion Web, which is a Google font, which we will use here. And we will select it and choose it. We see it has a weight of 600, which is semi-bold. We give it the size of 12 and a line height of 16, let's say, because we work with an 8 pixel based design system, which I will explain to you later. And we have a letter spacing of -1%, which in Elementor always comes to this amount, because otherwise it's too wide space, so the letter spacing is too far. So you always need to divide the numbers by 10, and then it's the right amount. We're done with this. We go for the H6, and we call this card headline because we don't need an H6 here. It's Titanium Web. Here 600 is already inputted. We need 18. We need 24 again. Because of the 8-pixel based design system, we have no letter spacing, I think. And that's it so far. Okay, one thing I forgot with the roofline, because we need it to be transformed, I guess. Yeah. Okay, and the last one now is the P small. And again, font is right, size already right. Uppercase is not the case. And we go with 16, and we have already the right letter spacing. So now we're done with that. Go bye-bye. And now we're done with the global fonts, and we can easily reuse them on the cards. Perfect. Now, here's the tool I was talking about in the very beginning. It's called the Designer add-on, and we'll use it because it can perfectly mimic the grid that was used from our designers to design and position the cards. It has some other great features, but in this tutorial we'll focus on the page grid. The page grid is even responsive, and this helps us to position things like in Figma very easily and exactly as designed. Okay, now let's set it up real quick. We go to Elementor, to the settings, and there we'll find the Designer Power Up add-on. And here we can turn on and off all of its features, but we need just 3 of them. Of course, the page grid, which I have turned on, the quick spacers, and the input nudge. They are all pretty useful, and I'll explain them later to you. Let's not forget now to save settings. We are still in preparations, but we're getting closer to really get going. But before we set up the grid, give me a second to explain why the heck such a grid is really useful. Any designer uses a spatial system, which is basically a set of rules for how to measure, size, space out your UI elements. And these rules make your website look really consistent. Without it, your design can feel cheap, inconsistent, and generally untrustworthy. Imagine it like a rhythm. It's subconsciously predictive for your brain and therefore visually pleasing. Our designers use the grid as well as an 8-point or 8-pixel design system. That means that every value, every margin, padding or element size can be divided by 8. And it's a very common system among web designers, and it will ensure a consistent look. And once you used it for a while, it gets very natural for you to build with it. Also, the Designer add-on will help you with that. Now let's set up the grid for desktop. When we check the Figma file, we see that the desktop design is made for a 1440 pixel desktop, which is, by the way, the native solution for 14-inch MacBook Pros. You also see that we use 12 columns, which is pretty common. We also see that the margins are 88 pixels and the gutter, which is the space between the columns, is 24 pixels. So far, so good. So here in Elementor, we can now go to the page grid settings, which you'll find under User Preferences, Page Grid, and that's where we input the full width from the design. That's the 1440 pixels. The offset are the right and the left margins, which are 88 pixels. And of course we want 12 columns because that's our usual number in the designs. And then we have the gutter, and that was 24 pixels. Now you can see the grid, which, by the way, you can turn off with Alt-G on a Mac and String G on a Microsoft computer. And by the way, why a gutter anyway? It's useful because we can align elements to the start and the end of it, which you will see. And then it's completely up to you which grid color you use. I normally go with this bluish color. So now the grid is set up perfectly, at least for desktop, and the final step is now to align it with the Elementor layout, which we'll do now. Let's open a container as a main wrapper again, and give it the right name, which is main wrapper. And now we check out how we can align it, or if it's aligned perfectly to the grid. For this reason, we take a heading, we drop it in, and we check it with the preview, and we see it's not perfectly aligned to the left. Why is that? Because we now select, we now select the main wrapper, and we see the width is pre-filled with the main Elementor width, which is 1140, and that's too narrow. So is it then the 1440, which we remember from the grid? And we check this with preview, and we see no, now it's too far to the left. So why is that? I explained to you. We have to consider also the margins when we use the page grid. So if we now subtract the 88 and the 88, we get this value. And now if we check this, it's perfectly aligned. Very good. So, but now let's check also some smaller screen sizes if everything works perfect. And now we see that the padding or the offset is working on the page grid, but the padding isn't. So that's what we have forgotten. We have set the offset perfectly, but now we have to set it also on the main wrapper itself. So what we do now is we add an 88 here and an 88 here, and if we now preview and we shrink the screen, we see everything except for the name of the page, which we will turn off later or in a second. Everything looks perfect. Great. Okay, now let's turn off this annoying name of the page, and we go to the settings. We go and set it to Elementor Canvas, and now it works a little, and then everything looks fine. I do save, and now if I preview now, we can just see all works perfect without the name of the page. Okay, let's go on. But wait a second, we can also go to Elementor site settings and to layout and change this default content width to 1264, and now every container that we throw in will be aligned, or the content of it will be aligned perfectly to the grid. Okay, let's update and go back. Okay, and now it's finally time to start with building the cards. Let's use the main wrapper and let's consider what we'll need to build and position the cards. But let's begin with the container that spans from the 2nd till the 11th column. First, we put in another container into the main wrapper, and we call it minor wrapper so we can distinguish them, and we move the headline inside the minor header, and we give the minor header background color so we can see what happens. Let's just take this one and hit preview, and we see it perfectly aligns inside the main wrapper. How can we make it span less from the 2nd till the 11th column? And the solution is we have to make the content width to full width. When it's boxed, we can shrink it, but we don't see what happens. So if we switch it to full width and it's on percentage, then we see what happens. And if we now go to the main wrapper and we turn on center mode, we can really see what happens. If we now select the minor wrapper and go down to 83, and you see it's perfectly aligned. Let's hit preview. Wonderful. Okay, now we can create the left and the right containers inside the minor wrapper, which will hold the text, which will come later to, and the cards, which we will focus on. So let's create the left inner container and call it like that. And let's give it a background so we can see again what happens. I'll use this color, and let's put something in, maybe the heading, so we can also see in the preview mode what's happening. And now let's do the same here. Change it to full width so we can see what happens when we reduce the width. And let's check how it should look like. Okay, it should span from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th until the end of the 6th. So we just need to work a little bit more. And I think we have to work with an 0.5. Is that true? It's not true. We can turn this off and we see now it's a 49. It's also in the preview. Turn off the grid for a second. Looks great. Maybe we change the colors here again. We turn off the navigator and the left inner container should have this dark serious business color, and we give this a white color. Maybe this is better. Yeah, looks fine. Now let's proceed with the right inner column. Let's duplicate the left inner container and call it right inner container. And one thing that we see is that they are now stacked. That's not what we want. We want them side by side. So we go to the minor wrapper, which is the parent, and we say we want to change the direction of it. So we check row horizontal, and now they align next to each other. Let's change the colors. So the left inner container should have or goes with the European stability. So now we see what we do. Okay, and what we do now is we have to align this right inner container from the, let's see, from the beginning of the 7th until the end of the 11th column. So how do we do this in Elementor? We select, first turn on the navigator, turn on the right inner, and then we'll shrink it. Oh, and we see we have something forgotten. We need to go to the minor wrapper, and now we say them to act like space between. And I think we have a problem, and that is the minor wrapper needs no color at all, or say a white color. And now we can see what happens here. So it's still too white. We go to the right inner container and we shrink it and shrink it and shrink it and shrink it. And let's close the navigator because it always fucks up the preview. So we need 29. 29 is a little bit too wide. So here now we need to work with 0.5. We preview it and it looks very good and like we want. And now we are done with the positioning. Let's finally go and create the fucking first card. What we'll need to do is to create one container inside the right inner container. So let's put one in, and we can get rid of the heading, or we put the heading into the container. Okay, now it's done. And let's also name it and call it card container 1. Perfect. Okay, now in Figma we can check the first text, and when I click on it, make sure you're in inspect mode, then I see it's a roofline and that we have perfectly set up in Elementor in the theme styles. Just select the heading. Where's the roofline? Here's the roofline. Looks perfect there, but let's also change the content and write inside. But before we go any further, I want to prevent you from doing a mistake. So when we check the color here of the inner container, we see that the inner container has the dark color, and it shouldn't have, because the inner container will hold the 3 cards. So the color that we use here, we will need to add to the card container. So we have selected, and then we now select the right color, which is the European stability, and we're getting closer, a little bit closer to the card design. Now let's head back to Figma and let's check 2 more things. The first thing is, if we click on the card, is the padding that can be seen here, and we can even copy it. You see it's copied to the clipboard. One more thing, we can also see if we turn off the grid that it has rounded corners, so we will remember a border radius of 8 pixels, and when we go back to Elementor we can add this. We have added the right color, at least for the background, and now we will add the padding, which I already did. That's good. Let's have a look. That was it before, that's with padding. But now we need also to add the border, and that was 8 pixels. And let's check it. Looks also nice. Now let's check the color. And now I remember I just wanted to go with a gray color that we already set up in Elementor. Let's just check the regulation gray and use this. And if we hit preview, we see we're getting again closer to the design. Now let's check back in Figma. Let's copy this text and go back and just duplicate this, put put in the text, select the right font style, and give it the right color. I think it's a serious business, can't be different. Yes, let me go here. Yeah, it's a serious business color. But let's check also now the paddings in between. So in Figma, we can see that there's 8 pixels below the first and the second text, and this should be, I think, 8 pixels. That's maybe a slight mistake. Everything you see has 8 pixel distance, so we work with this. Let's go back to Elementor, and now we can just insert 8 pixel, or we could also increase this to 8, or if we now, and that's a nice trick, if we hit shift and then the cursor up, we go to 8 pixels. And that's because we used the user preferences and the import nudge jump. That was a little feature we turned on in the designer add-on preferences. Let's go back. So what we need now is a small container which will hold the icon and the text. So let's drop in a container and name it icon and text. And then we can duplicate the heading. By the way, this shouldn't be an H2. Let's make a P, and this is also not an H2. It's also a P, because otherwise that wouldn't be so good for SEO. So, and now we can duplicate this heading and pull it into the container, and we can already change the text 3 min read. And now we need also an image. Let's pull an image in. So that's fine, but they shouldn't be stacked. They should be, yeah, next to each other in this row and in the other direction. Now let's choose this image and let me check what we need. We need the glasses. Select them. All right. And what we need now, we need to center it. If you see it, it's not centered. So we go to the parent, which is the icon and text container, and we select align items. That is perfect. What we do now is we can also, and now I show you a cool trick. For the padding, we go to the quick spaces, and here you see that we also adjusted it to 8, and now we can hover over and just scroll down, and you see it decreases and increases with this amount of 8 pixels. So that helps us. And also we need to give this 8 pixels to the left. And when we do now a final check, we see that these texts have a different font style. Let's adjust it quickly. This is still the roof line, so we do the P small here. And we can now just copy the first container, adjust the texts and the icons, and then we're pretty much done. So let's do this. Let's copy, let's duplicate the card container 1 and name it accordingly, card container 2. Let's copy the text and let's check. It has also a different color and a different text here. So I think we just start with the color, go for this neutral color, paste in the new text. Also here we write open inside and correctly. And then we exchange this for the eye icon. And then let's just duplicate this card and name it 3. Copy over the text, open inside stays the same. And now, final check. I think we're done. Let's preview it, and it looks awesome. And even if we shrink it down a little bit, you see it's a little bit responsive until it's not. But that's what we do in the next video. I hope you stay hungry, because in the next video I'm going to show you how to make the cards really responsive, of course with a little help of the designer add-on and the page grid. And if you like this channel and want to get notified about news on it, subscribe down below. See you in a few seconds in the next video.